Thank you to everyone who is joining us here virtually for this Showrunner State of the Union panel. I'm going to waste no time and bring in our amazing panelists in alphabetical order. We're going to start with Liz Feldman, who is writer, showrunner of Dead to Me, the Netflix series that I know everyone in my life was like gobbling up a couple weeks ago when it hit season 2 hit Netflix. So Liz, it's so nice to have you here.
Thank you so much. Great to be had. And thank you for gobbling up Dead to Me.
Yes, gobbled it. All right. And then I want to introduce Marta Kauffman, who is behind one of my all-time favorite shows, Dream On, Gen Z's favorite bingeable show, Friends, and the lovely Grace and Frankie. So thank you, Marta Kauffman, for being here.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here. I'm sorry I'm not there.
I mean, we're all like here together in our hearts, I think.
Our other tequila and tacos, I was like, oh my God.
I know, the tacos.
I don't know, the tequila spoke to me.
Yeah, well.
Yeah, yeah.
Next, we're going to introduce Julie Plec, the great Julie Plec, who I believe is showrunning every single show on the CW right now. I think that's accurate. You might know her from The Vampire Diaries, The Originals, Legacies. She's working on The Girls on the Bus. Julie Plec, hello.
Hi.
Hi, so nice to see you.
Good to be here. Usually by this point of the festival, I have laryngitis. I'm like, my arteries are clogged from the queso and I'm wildly hungover. So this is a refreshing change of pace.
And then lastly, I want to bring in Robin Thede, who I first saw at the Television Critics Association press tour last year. And when she was talking, I was just like this. Every single word she said, I was like hanging on. She is a comedian, writer, performer, producer, showrunner of a Black Lady sketch show. Robin Thede, thank you for being here.
Thank you so much. What an intro. Happy to be here. Happy to join this esteemed group of ladies.
That's incredible. I mean, the talent in this room. I wanted to start by addressing, the reason we're all doing this without tequila and tacos in our hands is, of course, this pandemic that has made us all retreat to the corners of our houses and like show off our bookcases or whatever it is behind us. But that, this had a huge impact on your industry, on your projects. All of you have something in the works, if not 9 things in the works. So I was just wondering if you guys could go through sort of how you handle as being the boss of these projects with all these people working under you, how you handled the pandemic and hitting your show. Let us start with Julie.
We had our studio, Warner Brothers, basically took the position that it is our choice whether to continue. Hanks, concurrent to NBA and pre-governmental shutdown. But we had just started to reach the tension breaking point, I think, where the crew and the cast were starting to log in and be like, hey, what are we going to do here? Like, what's going to happen? How are you going to keep us safe? I'm worried, younger actors, I just want to go home. Can I just go home? And as that was hitting sort of its stride, we were making decisions internally before the studio had weighed in about how to wrap up as much as we could, as quickly as we could. I said on that Wednesday, we need to get everything we can possibly get in the next 24 hours because I don't know if we're going to be here in 25 hours. And so when the call came from the studio, they said, it's your choice. And I should preface all this by saying I thought a lot of people can take issue with putting that decision in the hands of the bosses, and we could probably debate that for days. But in general, I thought Warner Brothers handled it very well. And so even what I'm about to say is not a ding on them at all, just sort of how it all went down. But they're like, but if you just know, if you shut down, you are shutting down for the season. Your season will be over. We will not be going back up to complete season 2. You will be done. And that was an easier decision for us to make because we had just completed an episode that could function as a credible cliffhanger, a credible season finale. Not, not our first choice, but at least it wasn't, sort of a story style dud episode. It had wrapped up a lot of good character stories and had a good juicy cliffhanger. So for us, we were like, good, send everybody home, just get everybody home. And we called the production and just kind of checked in, because we knew we were also putting people out of work about 3 to 4 weeks earlier than they were due to be out of work. And so we checked in with the production team and just said, hey, do you want to poll the department heads? Do you want to have them take a poll of their crew? What do they want to do? And they were like, oh no, literally everybody's ready to get the fuck out of here. Excuse my language. And so that was how it went down for us.
Robin, how did it hit you? Were you in active production? What was going on with you?
We were 5 days away from shooting. So we were, locked and loaded. I was getting all my new characters ready and my old ones, because I'm one of the stars of the show as well. So I was in crunch time. We were in full on rehearsals, and, locations were locked. Guest cast was starting to get locked in. So yeah, we were close to shooting, but didn't get a single shot off before we went home. So for us, HBO, I've been in contact with our executives, and I knew that we were going to stop down. It was just going to be for a matter of time. For how long? And it seemed like it was going to be 2 weeks at first, because we stopped down earlier than a lot of other productions. We closed shop Friday the 13th. So on March 13th, we were done. Everybody was home. But we started having these conversations in early March, because look, I'm a showrunner and performer who also has an autoimmune disease. So if somebody even so much as sneezes at work, I'm like, go home, even pre-COVID. So, they knew that I wasn't going to be in the position to allow a disease to run rampant amongst my crew. Also, we're just like a small family, so I'm just constantly obsessing over people's health. So not that everyone else isn't, but so Friday, I think Thursday or something, before we wrapped everything up, we had a call with the network, and they just, I don't know if it must have been unilateral. Everybody was like, go home. So I was glad I didn't have to make that decision personally, but I think that, everybody at the end of the day did what they had to do anyway. And by the 20th, I think everybody was home. But so for us, we shut down then, and then kind of wrapped things up remotely as much as we could. And throughout this time, we've been in constant communication with my producers, and also with the network, and with medical experts. And at this point, it's just figuring out when it's safe to go back to pick up and resume, and what we need to change in the era of COVID in terms of not shooting with a ton of extras, and what those physical days look like, social distancing, how actors work without masks, and shorter days, all the things that we've been talking about.
For you, Liz, your second season was, just on the horizon. How did that hit you in that stage of production?
So we were really, really close to being done with post-production, and let's call it Tom Hanks Wednesday, that Wednesday that, we all found out that he had COVID, and COVID became a real disease all of a sudden for people. I had 2 days left after that. And the following day, I was able to finish all my color timing and for the final 2 episodes. And then I had one more sound mix. But then LA sort of, put the hammer down. And my show is through CBS Studios. And just because this is the way it works sometimes, our facilities for post-production are at Warner Brothers. And like Julie said, Warner Brothers was a little bit more like, if you feel comfortable, you can go to work. But so luckily our sound engineers were able to go to work. And I went a little rogue. Maybe there were certain authority figures that did not want me to, continue working. But I was so close to finishing, and, I made sure that, and our sound engineers were going to be there anyway. So I very safely and conscientiously, with a mask and gloves and like my own container of wipes, went and finished the final sound mix. The facilities were going to be shut down at midnight. We finished at 9:30 p.m.
Wow.
Wow.
By the skin of our teeth, we were able to finish season 2. There were some delays in terms of our, it's Dead to Me is on Netflix, and it's in 190 countries, and they actually do dubs. They overdub the English dialogue with whatever language for each country. So we had some delays in terms of our dubs, but they decided that was at least they could show it with subtitles, and that's what they did. So we were able to meet our premiere date, which was May 8th, and it was fairly miraculous and only slightly illegal.
How about you, Marta?
Well, you initially asked, besides how we handled it, what is our role?
Right.
And our role, first and foremost, is to keep everyone safe. So we were in the middle of shooting our 5th episode of 16, literally in the middle of it. And as during that week that we're all talking about, the chatter was getting louder about how many people you could have together and how you're going to roost your crew. And then finally, on Thursday, which was the 12th, we made the decision to shut down. We have 4 elderly cast members whom we have to be extra careful about. But what we have been doing since then, because we literally stopped in the middle, but we have been, we continued post as much as we could until there was nothing left to do. We kept the writer's room going. We're still Zooming during the week, trying to finish out our season, because we also have the issue of our writers' contracts are up the end of July. We're not going to be back in production the end of July. So we have to try to finish our season between now and the end of July, the writing of it, and then we don't know when we'll be going back. It really depends on a lot of things. I don't think we'll be one of the first shows going back. I really don't. We're not going to be the canary in the coal mine. It's going to take us a little while. We're going to have to make sure that specifically our older cast and crew members are comfortable. I mean, everybody has to be comfortable, but those are the ones that are going to be more the determinants of when exactly we feel that it's safe to go back. So my job became trying to keep the trains moving, which is something we definitely do all the time anyway. But in this case, it was slightly different because Zoom is not nearly as productive as being in a writer's room.
Yeah, I was wondering, I wanted to ask you, and I think Julie, you also had some Zoom writers' rooms going on. Sort of what is the tangible difference for you in terms of the energy in a room versus a Zoom call?
Oh my God, it's night and day. First of all, you don't get to feel anybody's energy. And when you're in a writer's room, a lot of what happens, people, this one is low and this one is manic today, and all of that becomes part of the process. You also have the opportunity to get up and go get a snack and walk around. And here we're all sitting in one place, staring at each other's faces with no way to let off some steam. So it becomes super intense. We find we can't really work for more than an hour and a half at a time without taking a break, because it just becomes too intense. And the silences in a writer's room you can live with, somebody will jump in, but on a Zoom, I have to say the silences can go on for a very long time until someone's dog barks or something.
Right. What about you, Julie?
We were about halfway through Breaking the Girls on the Bus, and we had 5 of our 10 episodes written and several more already in the pipeline and getting written. So for us, the shift into Zoom in that particular situation wasn't as catastrophic because we had about 3 episodes left to break, and we had had a good run with each other to develop that chemistry and to have the kind of spark that we needed to get us through. But by the end, and I was in and out because I have show running partners who handle the heavy lifting of like the long Zoom sessions, and even by the end, me in there for 2 hours or 3 hours or whatever, I was finding myself just longing. You long for that energy that Marta's referring to. You're staring at a sea of faces, and there's nothing worse than staring at a sea of silent faces in the writer's room, where you secretly hate everybody for not having any good ideas because you hate yourself for not having any good ideas. But like magnify that times 1,000 on a Zoom, you're just staring at like the peanut gallery, and they're like, and then you're like, are they on the internet?
You also have to stare at yourself.
Right. And you have to stare at yourself, which is like
Nightmare.
None of us as writers want to stare at ourselves.
Worst.
Ever. Yeah. We don't want to stare at ourselves. I don't like staring at myself. And there's something like, I know half the time I'm like checking an email or checking a little text or, over on, Deadline or whatever. Like in my head, everybody that's sort of staring off into space is not listening. They're actually just like, watching Grace and Frankie on Netflix in the corner. So
I wanted to ask you too. Obviously, we're not just dealing with the pandemic right now. There's something else, large scale protests going on around the country. I've heard some of you refer to your work as sort of comfort watches, but then also all of your work engages in social issues in some level. So I was wondering how you as showrunners are thinking right now about your work and the service it provides as comfort and respite and entertainment, and the service it provides as being thought-provoking sort of television. And so I wanted to start with Liz, because I think you were so many people I know were watching your show very, very recently and very intensely. And so I was just wondering what's on your mind about that.
I think I was aware, and part of my desire and my sort of stubborn, desire to get the show done was to be able to provide that for people, to give people an escape, because already, just at the beginning of March, we were staying home more before we were, forced to stay home. And I was relying on television as my comfort and my escape. My choices were questionable, but I was watching a lot of TV, and I saw that perhaps this, my show could give that to people, and especially because Dead to Me is a pretty high stakes, slightly heightened show where it's quite a tense watch, but hopefully there's also a lot of love and joy, especially between the lead characters, played by Christina Applegate and Linda Cardellini. Like they're just very enjoyable to watch together. So I just, obviously I was hoping that would provide that for people, and the feedback has been, luckily just that people are, we're really happy to have that to sink their hearts into and their minds, and just, having, and this was before, what I would call this uprising that has started. That was just during COVID times, which is amazing that seems like simpler times, but, it does. And, obviously, I don't even know what to say about what's happening right now, because I don't feel like I have the words to express it, but, I will say that the uprising for racial justice that's happening right now has definitely made me look at the work that I do and think about, how I can participate in the positive change that we're hoping to create.
Robin, I wanted to ask you specifically about the idea of laughter as sort of a way to open people up to some ideas that they've decided to not even think about,
Yeah, I think, look, obviously I have a lot of thoughts about what's going on, and I'm in complete support of what's happening. I've been marching since, Trayvon and Mike Brown. So this is something that's really critical. I've been Black my whole life, and I'm glad that the rest of the world is finally recognizing, hopefully for the long term, that Black people are just not treated equally in this country or abroad, and that there's a lot of inherent work that even the most liberal people really have to do. And that's just real. And I'm not going to bite my tongue about that. Don't want to bring mood down, folks, but that's the reality of this country. And I love it. I think it's a great thing that's happening. And it's not about making people feel stuck in their guilt or whatever it is. It's about opening people's eyes the way the women's lib movement did for women, the way that gay rights movements have done in the past and can still continue. We can still be better in that arena as well. And issues like Standing Rock, and change only happens through revolution. So I'm invigorated at this time. And in terms of laughter being helpful in these times, I think laughter is always helpful in any times. But I think my show being, and I specifically named it a Black Lady Sketch Show on purpose, because I wanted people to know what they were tuning into, and I wanted people to know that to just get that elephant in the room out of the way, so that when they tuned in and saw 4 Black women playing most of the characters, that they weren't like, wait, where are all the white people? It's like, no, I told you in the title what it was. But you know, for us, it's about normalizing in the micro. It's about normalizing Black female comedians and showing that we can play anything that anybody else can play, and that we can deliver comedy in the greatest traditions of sketch that have ever existed. And if you watch the show, anyone who's watched the show understands that the show is not preaching or harping on anything. It's just a sketch comedy show. But I think in and of itself, it's revolutionary because that's never been done with a Black director, a Black showrunner, creator, all Black cast, all Black women writers room. That's just never happened. So I think our act of defiance is in our existence, and in being able to create the show, and HBO taking the chance to create something like this, to air and promote something like this that I created. So, you know, I think laughter helps in terms of not only helping people get through, even during COVID, right? If anyone's seen our show, or if you haven't, I highly suggest you watch it. It's available on all HBO platforms, and if you have the plugin on Amazon and Hulu. Okay, I'm done. But it deals with 4 women in the interstitial narrative part of the show that ties everything together. 4 women are quarantining in a house at the end of the world. So we predicted this.
That's so true.
And Liz just realized.
I just realized that because I was thinking about how I enjoyed the interstitials, and you're like a prophet, evidently.
2 years ago, when we first started writing season 1, I had a fever dream in the middle of the night, and I was like, here's what the interstitials are going to be. My writers, I wrote it down on single space paper, 4 pages, about breaking the whole like way we were going to do it. And the writers looked at me like I was crazy, which is not the first time, but they looked at me like I was crazy, and they were like, all right, we're on board. And they were like, we don't really get it, but walk us through it and we'll get through it. So they got on board and wrote an amazing story, as we all did together. And yeah, and we've got to continue that in season 2. So it'll be interesting because our room was done. We have to write everything before we shoot, because we have to block shoot everything, and we write and we shoot, you know, dozens and dozens of sketches. So they have to all be done. So it'll be interesting though. Some of the things won't adapt post-COVID. But well, hopefully you know, in terms of racial justice and that sort of thing, our show is already in that pocket. Like that, nothing will change in terms of content there. We're still going to say we will want to say and be amazing and disruptive in our own right, and just being on television. But in terms of COVID, it might change a little bit. Like there's one sketch I know we're not going to shoot whenever we come back, which took place in a hospital waiting room. About it was a little risky anyway, but it really feels inappropriate now. So luckily we overwrite, pitch thousands of sketches, write hundreds, and we shoot about 32 to 38. So we have a ton of material. We're not worried about that. But as Marta said, we want to get back to work when it's safe and not be guinea pigs. Luckily for us, our show is a little bit more malleable than others, and we can take away extras and animals and kids and like strip it down to the basics if we need to, but we are going to do it the safest way possible. But I think, you know I'm getting off the topic of laughter. Obviously, I have a lot to say, and I'm home alone a lot. So, as we all are. But but you know, luckily, I mean, the virtual writers room thing, I don't know how that's working, but I mean, it's really interesting for me to hear because I'm not running any virtual writers rooms. We were done, and everything else I'm working on is a solo project or with my features partner. So we always Zoom anyway. So yeah, I think, but laughter is just so critical, and I think laughter can teach you about other cultures. So if anybody watches a Black Lady sketch show, they're inherently going to learn things about our point of view, about things we have to say, and they're going to laugh without feeling, you know, any sort of like, oh, I was taught something. You know, it's still just a great time, and it's a great sketch show. So
I was speaking of comedy, I was talking to a friend of mine the other night who was telling me about Black AF, which I hadn't heard of or seen. I think it's a Kenya Barris comedy on Netflix. And you asked the question about being somebody who, you know, whose shows provide comfort. And I have been contacted by so many people during this run of COVID about, you know, their kids, their 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds are discovering Vampire Diaries and watching Vampire Diaries. And it's so great because everyone's watching Vampire Diaries and everyone's watching Gossip Girl, and everyone's watching Dawson's Creek, and everyone is watching Gilmore Girls, and everyone's watching, you know, all those shows on Netflix that are comfort and binge. And if you look at all of us, those shows I just listed, my own included, there's probably maybe 3, if that, Black series regulars total. And that has been the hardest pill for me to swallow, I think, is that I'm part of that group. And that in that, you know, we could all make a million excuses about the time and blah, blah, blah. But the bottom line is the chicken soup for the soul television that people are, you know, running to Netflix to gobble up is very, very white. And so I like had my own sort of moments of shock and awe and horror about that. But also then I started seeing people starting to pass around on social media, like, hey, you looking for something to watch? Go watch Dear White People, right? Dear White People on Netflix is awesome and funny and powerful. Go watch When They See Us, which is depressing and horrific and awful, but so important, you know, and we could go on and on. But that was a big kind of wake up call for me, realizing, I mean, I've been relitigating the choices that we made as writers and I made as a showrunner on the Vampire Diaries for years, and trying to make living amends with everything I do moving forward. But it's interesting to see what people still gravitate to, what white people still gravitate to for comfort.
yeah, and if I can just peg onto that, because I think it's such a good point. And I would just say everything doesn't have to be about Black trauma also. I love When They See Us. I highly recommend people go watch Ava's 13th documentary as well. But, you know, what was, I think the highest rated streaming thing right when all of this kicked off was The Help, which is like, to me, is mind blowing. It's like, oh, I'm going to learn about Black people. Let me go watch Black Maids and see a white savior movie. It's a great movie. And Hidden Figures is a great movie. And those are all historical. I mean, Hidden Figures is history. The Help is fiction. But the point is, there are just modern Black stories that you can watch too. You can watch, you know, you can watch a Black Lady sketch show. You can watch Blackish. You can watch whatever. There's luckily, unfortunately, there are not as many as, you know, Julie, as you were talking about, to choose from, because they just don't get made. But there are modern, my challenge now is greenlight these modern Black stories. We want to see modern Black stories of Insecure. Oh my God, it's so good. That's the one I'm like, go watch Insecure. Go watch Black people just living regular ass lives and being flawed and not being strong Black women all the time or making mistakes. Just all the things we love about any other show that we've grown up watching, you know, is just as important as When They See Us, as the 13th, as you know, Dear White People, which has an overt social message, which is my dear friend Justin Simeon. It is fantastic. The TV show is gorgeous. We have the same DP first season. Like, I highly recommend all of those things. But also, I think part of the normalization process, which is all any of us are asking for, is for people to just watch our stories the way we watch anything else. Or we want to be able to make our version of Vampire Diaries, or our version of Buffy, or our version of whatever. You know, we want to be able to make sci-fi. We want to be able to make horror. It's why what Jordan Peele is doing is so important. I'm writing features in different cross genres that Black people have never made before. Like, it's just really important to see us normalized in all genres. And it's not about making you know, no one expects anybody to, you know, be on their knees apologizing for past behavior. It's about what we can do now. It's about what we can do to not tokenize Black people in these stories either, and to not say, okay, well, I hired 2 Black people, but I don't have any writers who can write for them, write in their voice, but I don't have anybody who can light them correctly, but I didn't hire any hair and makeup people to be able to make them look the way their counterparts are. I didn't have training with my staff to avoid microaggressions, and so that people have the same experience on set. It's a comprehensive thing that has to happen. And that's what I want people to understand, is that it's not just about hiring 1 Black writer and 1 Black actor. That's not it. It's about creating an environment where everyone feels equal on set. So when I come on set, I don't have to do my own hair and makeup before I get there. The actors don't. Or if I'm in the writer's room, I don't have to explain my pitch and my point of view before I can even pitch. You know, it's about that people, and look, everybody's not gonna understand where you come from. We have a Black women only writer's room, and there are people that say things and I'm like, wait, what? Because we just didn't have the same experience. But it's about getting rid of the feeling that nobody on this call has. But there are people, because I've been treated this way in a writer's room, where they think automatically that I don't know what I'm talking about in terms of writing or other things. I mean, it's why I started creating shows, because I was like, well, nobody can judge me if I'm the boss and they're working for me because I'm making their, you know, I'm signing their check. But it's taken 20 years to get there. And other people, it's taken much shorter, to be honest. We have a longer trajectory in this business and a lot less success. We're not asking for anybody to hand us anything. We're just asking for people to try to understand our experience and to see us as equals. So anyway, soapboxing again, but I think this is important to talk about. We're talking to people, yeah, who are people are watching who want to be showrunners, or who want to be writers and who want to be in the TV industry. And it's really important that for all people of color, I'm specifically talking about Black people with a capital B right now, but for all people of color, that we're not just tokens in the room, but that we're able to be incorporated into that experience. And everybody that walks into that room, women know this from men, you know, a woman speaks up and a guy just tunes out immediately. It's that we have to fight it at all levels. But when it comes to Black people and people of color in the room, we have to we have to expect the same out of everyone, but we also have to give everyone the same amount of resources to be able to achieve those accomplishments. You know, we've seen these diversity programs in the past with writing programs where it's like the diversity hire that's paid for by the network. They're not paid out of the show's budget, and they're not treated as a full-blown writer on the show. And that to me is insane. I remember writing a spec script for Parks and Rec years ago, and my agent didn't submit it to the showrunner that I was trying to get a job on his show. And he told me months later, I said, whatever happened with that? I never got a meeting. I thought that spec was really good. He goes, oh, the spec is good, but it wasn't a diversity position, so I didn't send it. I was like, what? So that agent obviously got fired, but it's like, yeah, mouths open, right? And it's like, he literally thought he couldn't submit my scripts if it wasn't a diversity position. It's that kind of thinking that we have to deal with still to this day, where agents, listen, let me tell you, this is the last thing I'll say. Well, no, it's probably not, but I'll stop after I say this. When I staff my shows, I stop asking agents for recommendations. And I love my team, even though they've all been fired. But I've loved my teams throughout the years in modern history, except for the one I had to fire. But when I say I want to hire Black writers, whether it was this, my former late night show, on the nightly show on Comedy Central, all these shows I've run, I want to hire Black writers. Please send me Black writers. And they send me lists of white male writers and go, these guys are really good. I know you wanted Black, but this is all we have. How do you have at an agency with 500 agents, no Black writers to send me for sketch comedy or late night? They're like, well, we know a couple of drama ones, we know a couple, but they're all on shows. They're working. And it's like, well, then find some new ones. That's your job, you know? So I now have a database of hundreds of Black writers, mostly women. And I'm part of Lena Waite's group, Black Women Who Brunch. And we go on a retreat every year and we network amongst each other. Now the Writers Guild has a diversity writers database now, which I highly recommend using for showrunners. But we've had to create a lot of these resources ourselves just to get people to even see us. So anyway, State of the Union address for me.
That's really good. Well, I want to throw you guys a question from the audience, if that's all right with you. You know, our folks who are watching on YouTube, you can type a question into the comments field and it makes its way to me. And one question that people wanted to ask you was, what didn't you know your first year of running a show that you wish you had known? And let me start with Marta on that one.
Everything. I mean, first time I ran a show was the first series I did. I didn't get to work on other people's series, so we were flying by the seat of our pants. I guess, you know, some things came very naturally to me. I wish I knew, I had known then more about post-production. That's an area that when you come up through the writer ranks or the actor ranks, you don't necessarily have experience in post, and it is the last chance you have to write the story in post. So I would highly recommend having experience in the editing room. I think it's really important. It is, you know, as someone once said, there's the show you write, the show you shoot, and the show you cut, and they're 3 different shows. So that would be something I wish I knew. I also think I wish I understood that my job was not only to make sure that everybody shared a vision and that everybody's influence was crucial on what that vision is, and everybody's collaboration was crucial. I think one of the things I love about TV is collaboration. And I had to learn how deep that collaboration could go. The gaffer could have a great idea. So I wish I knew that earlier, because I probably missed some really good ideas. And I have to say, the last thing I want to say, based on what Robin was talking about,
Yeah,
I wish I knew then what I know today. I would have made it. I just wish I knew then what I know now. I would have made very different decisions. I mean, we've always encouraged people of diversity in our company, but I didn't do enough. And now all I can think about is, what can I do? What can I do differently? How can I run my show in a new way? And that's something I not only wish I knew when I started show running, but I wish I knew all the way up through last year.
how about you,
But
Liz?
you know what?
Oh,
You guys
yeah.
are just as much a part of systemic racism as well, because it's a system.
Right.
That's what I keep telling people. It's not one person being racist ruining everything. It's a system that was set up by racists to encourage and teach racism and disguise it. No one was supposed to know that it was wrong. That was the point. We were supposed to look like we were yelling for no reason. We were supposed to look like kneeling was an offense to the flag and not a cry to stop killing us. We're supposed to be made to look bad. And now people know better. And when you know better, you do better. And that's all people are asking for. And at the end of the day, what you can do now, I'll give you a couple tangible things. Demand that these agents have women, Black people, Indigenous people, and all other POC on their roll. Demand it. Demand when you call and say, I need writers, and I know you guys know a million writers at this point, so a lot of it is just that word of mouth. And that's why it's hard for us to get in the door, because it's people you know. But demand that they have more people on their rosters. Demand that, some people demand quotas. They say it's got to be 50% women and people of color. That's fine. But also just a tiny thing, and I've been tweeting about this, is like, sorry, my allergies are going crazy. A tiny thing you can do is, if you're talking about Black people, say Black. Don't say people of color. You can say African American if it makes you feel comfortable. That's fine. We don't care. but say Black. And the reason why I say that, or say Latinx, or say Indigenous, or say, because we get lost in that a lot of times, everything from writing to casting to producing to crew. But if you mean Black, or you mean, you know, Puerto Rican, like, be specific, because what happens is when you say people of color and somebody's like, oh, this person's, you know, then they start splicing fractions, right? Then they start going, oh, this person's an eighth, you know, blah, blah, blah. So they're technically a person of color. We filled the box. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about real representation in terms of holistic, right? So if you have a reason in your material to have a Black writer in that room, or the vision of the show, you know, when you walk down the street, you don't just see people that look like you. So why should we see that on television? Most people. If you live in a small rural town, maybe, but I grew up in Iowa. It was way more diverse than people think. So I just failed to think that TV can't reflect what we see in real life. So I just think those are a couple little things, but I hear you. Like, there's a lot of pain on both sides. That was a really real, I felt that, Marta, like that I have sympathy for that. And that's why I want people to know, like, no one wants to be a token. No one wants to be in an all white writers room and be a Black person trying to speak up on behalf of all Black people. And they only talk when people go, well, what would the Black person say? And then everyone turns to you. I used to be in a writer's room. For 10 years, I was in writer's rooms with nothing but men. Comedy is a very male genre. So one show I was just called the girl writer. And they would go, well, let's ask the girl writer, what would she say? You know, and that had nothing to do with race. That had everything to do with gender. So I understand that argument on all sides. And it's just about incorporating people in a real way. How would you treat your friend who was Black? Are you going to constantly bring up their race or only ask them things about being Black? No, you're going to talk to them about their day. You're going to go to lunch. You're going to have a coffee. And you know what I mean? So that's all it is. That's all. That's all. Guys,
just that. Well, on that note, I want to ask Julie specifically, because I know this about you, Julie, is that you are famously good at bringing up people, sort of bringing new people into the industry, putting them in writers' rooms, promoting from within, like the Julie Plec sort of track for getting into television is something that I know a lot about. And so I was just wondering if you could talk about, and any of you, I'd be curious to hear, what responsibility you feel you have as a showrunner to also educate like new people in the industry, you know, as far as what it takes to be a TV writer or be a showrunner, et cetera.
I think that that historically in television writers' rooms, which not all men, hashtag, but has been a sort of patriarchal system for years. Since its onset, there has often been this sense of like the grand poobah and then everybody else that doesn't matter, right? Specifically, I mean, I've talked to women who are the only women in comedy rooms for years, and like that experience is the nice version of what of what they went through. And I think that as men have become more feminist and as women have taken more control and more power, you have seen a shift in what it means to be a showrunner. Because for me, showrunning is not a one-person job. Showrunning is a 952-person job. I just happen to be the person that gets to say yes or no the most, right? And so if you think of it through that lens, then you need to have a team that is there to take one of the 10,000 tasks every day, and you need to make sure your team understands what they're doing and it feels supported to make those decisions and is sent out into the field to learn. And people always talk about me as like I'm a great teacher. I'm not a great teacher in that I don't take the time to be like, and here's what you're going to do when you arrive on set. But I am a very, very inclusive teacher in that I'm just like, okay, get in there and go, and like nobody can fire you if you do this, like don't worry, and if that actor's an asshole to you, you can talk back, and I just try to give them a sense of empowerment and excitement for the experience, because I say, if this is your first job, then I expect you within 10 years to have my job, if not sooner. In fact, if you could get there in 5 years, that'd be awesome, because I'm really tired and I really need to like not have to work this hard, and so I think that the more we do, I mean, honestly, I'm not going to go on a tangent for too long, but my biggest soapbox beef right now is that with the streaming shows and the shorter orders, the new normal is to write all the episodes before you shoot the show. And what has been created in that system is that then there's maybe 1 or 2 producers that go produce the show when it's shooting, which means none of those writers are budgeted for, paid for, or included in going to set to produce their own episodes, which basically means all this premium and amazing television that we're creating right now is not actually teaching any of the up and coming writing generation how to produce, which means they won't know how to be showrunners, which means we're basically saying, here, welcome to the party, young writers and young Black writers and young Indigenous writers and everything, but you're never going to know how to do my job because there's no money for it and there's no opportunity for it there. And that keeps me up at night. I'm constantly trying to think of like the life hack for that, of like how to make that happen. But even then, it's money. I'm fighting the financial system. So I won't go further down that road, but that's my answer there.
I would love to add to what you're talking about in the beginning. We have tried very hard to always give our writers' assistants a script, promote them to writer whenever possible. We also hire interns. And one of the things we do with the interns is bring them everywhere with us. When we go to post, when we go to a production meeting, when we go to a table read, which, by the way, I meant to mention earlier, we've been doing virtual table reads and even had a Zoom call with our entire crew, which was fantastic. But anyway, I have to say, I'm a parent, and it's a little bit like when you see your people who started as interns getting coffee now sitting at the table, throwing out amazing ideas. It gives me personally great pleasure to see that. And I couldn't agree more with Julie. Then you want to see them take over. Then you want to see them move forward and take over. And I totally understand what's keeping you up at night, Julie. It has occurred to me as well.
Liz, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, to add to that, I would say I'm a showrunner because I had a mentor who, showed me, or I guess saw something in me. His name is Michael Patrick King. He was my boss on Two Broke Girls. Early on, I sort of I don't know where I got the balls, but I kind of was like, I don't know, maybe you should, we were at the 4 little monitors. It's a multi-camera show. And I was like, nah. And he looked at me and he's like, you think you could do this better than me? And I said, maybe. And he didn't smack me, which was sort of miraculous. He instead sort of said, you're going to be a showrunner. And he started to treat me like somebody who could be a showrunner. And I learned a lot from him, both, to be honest, good and bad. And, that is the reason why I felt compelled to, when I, first got a pilot picked up, and when it was brought to series, I literally had just read the book Lean In, just to be super on the nose about it. And I leaned in and I was like, I want to be the showrunner. And it was because of Michael that I felt that I could have that. And I am often looking for that opportunity to do that for the next generation. And it is something I'm really mindful of, to, be able to mentor, especially young women, because I started in the writer's room 25 years ago at the age of 18 as the only woman in a room. And I had pretty much a nightmare experience. That has informed me as a showrunner essentially ever since, even though, it was so long ago, but I was very sexually harassed at the age of 18 by a man who only recently was called out and dethroned. So, it's extremely important to me to uplift women, and especially women who would not necessarily get the opportunity otherwise. But it is also something I need to be better at, because I think I get really sort of mired in just how difficult it is to be a showrunner. It is a very tough job, and it does feel like 8,000 jobs in one. And I look forward, to exactly that, which is like helping people learn those skills. And Julie, what you're talking about the ability to bring people with you onto set, like it is, we have the same issue. And so what I've started to do is, before we even start, as we're dealing with the budget, I try to highlight 2 or 3 writers that I know I need to bring with me, and this hopefully, for what will hopefully be our 3rd season, like I'm going to try to include, a younger, like a story editor writer, because I'm like, I see something in her and I'm like, you could be a showrunner, like you have this, you just need the experience. You need somebody to pay you to be on the set to learn. And so anyway, there it is. That's what I had to say.
We have a question from the audience that a lot of people are asking that we make sure we address, because we've got people, of course, because it's a virtual event, we've got people watching from all over the country. And so a question from one of our audience members, Lamonia, she's asking, can you speak to diversifying beyond race and gender? What about writers who are not from NYU, USC, et cetera, or even non-college grad remote writers, Middle America or the South? Julie, let me start with you. Waving your hand in your head.
Just talking about this last night with my friends who are writers, and I did a panel in Atlanta about a year ago, and one of the conversations that came up is the tremendous barrier to entry for anybody that doesn't have like wealthy parents or a trust fund or grandparents that send them rent money every month, because the only way to get a job as a writer in LA is to come to LA, right? And that's just always been the truth. And so we were talking about how that in and of itself is part of the problem. That is part of the systemic problem, is somebody in Atlanta can't just like pack up their car, move to LA, give up everything, unless they have a credit card with a sky high limit or somebody paying a bill for them. And so I started talking to Warner Brothers about how we can start to open up the opportunity. And even in my head, I'm like, that's never going to work. I mean, what are we going to do? Like have a bunch of writers on Skype? I mean, Skype never works. Skype's like, the connection's always terrible. Like, and then COVID happens and we can see, well, it's not ideal sitting in a fucking Zoom all day. It can work. And I could very easily hire writers in Atlanta who are, or anywhere for that matter, specifically Atlanta, that's where we shoot. And I'd love to be able to bring that community creatively into the process, but they could actually get a job writing for a show via Zoom if they don't have the means with which to live in LA. And that is a game-changing idea. And now we have to figure out how to make that happen. Like, I don't know if there is a literary agency in Atlanta, but by God, there sure as shit should be a regional lit agency in the same way that there's local casting. Like, let me call up and be like, I want to hire 2 people in the city. Who do you got? Because, legally there's all kinds of problems of like accepting submissions and material. You have all that logistics. Robin, go ahead. I see you nodding.
Oh, sorry. Mute. Classic Zoom mistake. I was on mute. I'm just agreeing. Everything you're saying is exactly right. It's like, obviously, if I'm having trouble finding Black writers in LA, I would rather go to a Black market where there are more Black writers. And I know that they're there. And so I meet them, honestly, doing press for this show, as the performer part of the show. I end up meeting a lot of writers at different film festivals, at Urban World, at the American Black Film Festival, all these places, and writers come up to me, and that's how I get to know a lot of them. And that's how I found people. So festivals like this one, even, we're talking about it now. But I do think you're right. Agencies need to have, because agents are the gateway. Even if I'm not getting them from agencies are often the gateway for a lot of people. So I think that's one component. Agents need to do better with finding some sort of, whether it's programs or whatever it is. I know everybody's not going to just have a Gmail address where you can send your script, because like you said, a lot of people don't understand the moment we read something, we become legally liable if we have any sort of, especially for a sketch, if you send me one, I never read sketches. I never read anybody's unsolicited stuff without a waiver, because if I read something and then I already have a sketch that's sort of like that, you could sue me and be like, well, she read my thing and then she put it on the show. So that's why I don't read stuff. People often take it personally. I'm like, no, legally, I cannot read your stuff. But, you know, for us, we reached out. I literally went to Black student union groups in the 2 weeks I was off between season 1 and season 2, between promoting season 1 and making season 2, and went and found all our Black interns. I went myself to the universities, to Marymount, to wherever, and went to some of the other feeder programs, because I was sick of getting all white interns from trust funds. I grew up in a trailer park. I did not go to Harvard. I went to Northwestern, which is a very amazing school. But yes, hi Julie, hi Wildcat. But I didn't go there. You know, I still got loans. Like, you know, it's like, so I did not become a writer. Liz, I think we probably started writing around the same time, but I did not get my first writing job until 7 years in. I could never get hired as a writer's assistant. That was all white men, some white women at the time, but I could never even just get a writer's assistant job. And I was telling everyone in town that's what I wanted to do. I had a degree from Northwestern University, could not get hired. And so I started writing for stand-ups, Mike Epps, Kevin Hart, Anthony Anderson, Chris Rock. I got in that world, started writing for them, writing on award shows, got my WGA card, and then eventually got hired as a staff writer. I staffed on 2 shows before I became a showrunner. That's how long I was in this damn business. But I knew so much by this because I had done every other job at that point. And Black writers, if you look at the WGA report that just came out about diversity and inclusion, Black writers are stuck, that story editor and below. They do not make it up into showrunner ranks. I am one of a handful of Black showrunners, and let alone Black women showrunners. I think we can, on less than 2 hands in the entire industry, count them. So it's, and we all know that women showrunners are lower than they need to be too, in terms of that number. But what happens is I get the plight, because I was a writer coming from Iowa, from a trailer park, who didn't know how to make it in this business. And it took me a very long time. So we have to do better. I just wholeheartedly agree with what Julie's saying.
So we just have a couple more minutes. So I want to make sure that Marta and Liz have a minute to address this question if they want to. Marta, do you have any thoughts on this?
I don't remember what the question was.
Like, I guess non-traditional tracks, if you can't afford to move to LA, if you're not from like a feeder school or something like that, what's a non-traditional track for writers?
You know, I don't know. I honestly don't know. The world is new. I'm sitting here thinking of what you're all talking about and how you do, if writers' rooms in fact do go back into a physical space, logistically, where you put the computer so the Zoom person feels like they're part of the room. So I'm just trying to think logistically how that would work. I think it's really important that we have places that we can go to read people that we might not ordinarily read. And if they're not able to get the agents, then we have to find systems and programs and places that they can send their scripts. You know, I agree, legally, it's very tricky. It's very tricky legally. So I never would read a friend's script. I won't read a Grace and Frankie script. I mean, you just can't, because you will get sued. So I actually don't know the answer to the question. I certainly understand the great need to widen the pool from which we hear voices.
Yeah.
I don't have the answer as to how to do that. I wish I did.
A 2-second interruption, Liz. Yeah. Sorry, I was just going to say that what we should do is challenge. I challenge all the agents that we fired, so I guess they're not going to listen. But I challenge them to do local outreach. You've got agents that are that have family in all these cities. Everyone can work from home. Go Zoom, go work from home and start building a literary community locally. There's no reason to not be able to have agents on the ground in different places, in different cities, pitching writers that in the beginning or maybe forever can only work via Zoom. I think it would be an incredible
Okay,
opportunity.
I'm so sorry to interrupt. I just want to let you know we just have like mere seconds left. I think
Oh,
before
Liz,
they're gonna
I'm
cut
sorry,
us
I'm
off,
sorry,
so
I'm
I'm
sorry.
Wait,
sorry.
I have a really good resource.
I yield my time. I yield my time.
Thank you. So the blacklist will read your stuff for free, so you can get it into shape for TV and film professionally, so that you know what you're submitting is good. Piggybacking on what Julie said, I challenge agents with her to put out a general email list and hire people to read those people's submissions. That's how you're going to find people that you don't even need to hire them over Zoom, because half of them I will pay to relocate a writer for a job. I will pay. If I love your writing, I will pay to have you live in California for the duration of that show. So don't worry about that. Most showrunners will, and I have a micro budget. So I use the blacklist and other script writing resources. Read everything you can. Make sure you are the best damn writer you can be. And then I challenge agencies to have a general email submission and hire a dedicated staff to read those scripts. Get more diverse writers, get more geographically diverse writers, make it happen.
Does anyone have a last message that they want to shout out to people who are watching this?
I agree with Robin.
Yes.
Excellent. All right. Well, thank you all for being here. Thank you all for watching. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah,
Thank
thanks.
you.
Thanks, everybody.
It's been an honor. Thank you for letting me talk so much, but I am truly honored to be with all of you. Thank you.
It's been an honor
Every
to
word is gold.
listen.
Likewise.
Bye. Thanks. Bye.